a question for Alan. My name is Neil Herland. I'm a national reporter with CBC Radio News, based here in Toronto. There's obviously a lot of emotion among the people here. How well do you feel that Canadians are supporting your cause, and how much information or misinformation is out there?
I was actually just talking about that point. I feel like personally that there is a lot of misinformation. The truth or the reality of what's really happening in the Middle East is not being reflected accurately here. The idea of the numbers that we were talking about, the 400 people dying, the 2,000, the graphic pictures that I personally watch on the Eastern media, I do not see.
What do you think would be a fair, I mean, the Canadian government considers the government in Gaza to be a terrorist organization, Hamas. What do you think is a fair way for Western media to cover Hamas and what's happening in Gaza?
Well, the idea here, I'm not talking about any political regime. I'm talking about people dying. I'm talking about an entire population being massacred, children, women that are innocent, that have no political affiliation. So I don't care, personally. I really don't care. I'm just talking about the humanitarian side. People are dying, and that's it, and that needs to stop.
How concerned are you about the people? I mean, there have obviously been Israelis who have been victimized by suicide bombings and stuff. Are you equally passionate about the attacks on civilians on the Israeli side?
I don't think any, I think the civilians in general, whether it's the Israelis or the Palestinians, they should not be involved in the war crimes that are happening between the Israel political regime and Hamas. In general, both sides should not be targeted. However, that's the unfortunate reality that's happening right now. So, I mean, if that's how it's going to be, then that's how it's going to be. But I do recognize that both sides should not be targeted. So.
Do you speak out against, I guess, the launching of Katyusha rockets?
Sorry, you need to...
Do you speak out against, I mean, some of your own people in Gaza are launching rockets into Israel. I assume you're speaking out against that as well.
Again, we see here that you are playing this media game with equalizing both sides. I think the numbers are very clear. We are talking over the last week, the Israeli military has killed 400 Palestinians, critically injured 2,000, 5 Israelis have been killed. We are speaking about 1.5 million people in the world's largest open-air prison. If you want the rockets to stop, the occupation has to stop, Israeli apartheid has to stop, then the rockets will stop as well. You are asking 1.5 million people to be starved like rats in a cage and do nothing about it. If you think this is a fight between two equal sides, I am sorry, you are extremely wrong. These numbers speak for themselves. This is not a war between two sides. It is the murder of innocent civilians. And maybe others would like to ask questions now as well.
Sorry, Shirley Engel from Global News. I don't know what you were suggesting, but I don't think that's what he was suggesting, that it was an equal war between two sides. But just a simple point, do you oppose Hamas's actions by launching rockets into Israel? Simple question without trying to weigh the sides.
And the simple answer, thank you for your question, the simple answer is when Israeli occupation ends, when the siege ends, when Israeli apartheid ends, when the crimes against humanity end, when the killing of civilians end, then the rockets will also stop.
I think what's also very important, we're here to denounce any type of aggression against any civilian in both sides. We're not here to support any acts of terror or so on against any civilian. That have been said, and I think the question should be asked, and that's why we point our fingers to the Canadian government. We think the Harper government is clearly complicit and clearly responsible in one way or another for what's happening in Gaza. Let's remember, Harper government was the first government to cut ties with Gaza and to cut aid to the Palestinians trapped in Gaza when Hamas was democratically elected. People have tendency to use that word of Israel being the only democracy in that area. Well, Hamas was democratically elected, like it or not. Hamas do indeed represent many factions within the Palestinian population. Hamas is indeed recognized also for its civil and humanitarian activities in Gaza. So yes, maybe for the Harper government, who is aligned to the Republican regime of George Bush, it's a terrorist organization. But for many Palestinian and other people around the world, they are indeed resisting to the occupation.
I just have a question. If the government doesn't meet the demands you're making right now, what steps would you be taking?
Well, I think as a Canadian, we will continue to raise the awareness. We, as you can see, we're not here just one single group. We are a coalition of concerned Canadian citizens from a broad range of civil societies and faith group. I think if a government is responsible, he should listen to its own citizen. And clearly there is more and more people standing against this illegal occupation of Palestine and this atrocity and murder happening in front of our eyes.
Well, Hamid, you just said that the Harper government is responsible for what's happening. Do you really believe that?
Well, absolutely. If you remember, Harper government was the first Western government cutting ties and refusing to recognize the government of Palestine. And at the time, it was democratically elected government, according to the majority of international observers who were there, according to people like Jimmy Carter, who was also one of the person leading that election. And yes, by doing that, Harper government legitimized the invasion of Gaza by the Israelis. Harper government legitimized the killing, but also the arrestation and kidnapping of elected member of the Hamas government of the time. And Harper government indeed is responsible for the outcry who happened there, yes.
So the Harper government is responsible for the violence?
Well, we think the position of Canada did encourage that type of violence and the refusal to recognize Hamas as a legitimate government. I'm not saying Harper is responsible directly of the government, but the message sent by Harper indeed encouraged that type of reaction from Israel.